Okay, we are back with Happy Times in Noisy Village. We are making our way right through this book. We're already to chapter 13, which is called Anna and I Are Going to Be Baby Nurses. Perhaps. One day last summer, the pastor in Big Village invited everyone in Noisy Village to a large birthday party. Well, he didn't invite the children, but Mommy and Daddy and Uncle Eric were invited, and all the other grown-ups, even Grandfather. Aunt Lisa felt badly because she didn't think she could go because of Kirsten. Then Anna and I said we could look after her. We were going to be baby nurses when we grew up, so it would be a good thing if we started practicing right away. But do you have to practice on my sister? Olaf said. He would have liked to look after Kirsten himself, but he had to milk the South Farm cows and feed the pigs and chickens while his mother and father were at the party. Britta would have loved to help too, but she was in bed with a terrible cold. Aunt Lisa was very happy when we told her what we wanted to do, but Anna and I were even happier. I pinched Anna's arm and said, "Won't it be fun?" And Anna pinched me back and said, "I wish they'd hurry and leave soon so we could start." But it always takes a terribly long time for people to get ready for a party, except Grandfather. He was ready at 6 o'clock in the morning, although they weren't supposed to leave until 10. He was all dressed up in his black Sunday suit and his best white shirt. As soon as Uncle Eric had hitched up the horses, Grandfather went to the North Farm wagon and sat down to wait. This was even before Aunt Greta had started to put on her party dress. Aunt Lisa kept on giving us all sorts of instructions until the very last minute. And then Daddy and Uncle Nils and Uncle Eric smacked their horses and they all drove off. Aunt Lisa had said that we should let Kirsten be outdoors as much as possible because she was the least trouble there. At noon, she should have her lunch, which we were all ready to heat. After that, she should take a nap for a couple of hours. "Won't that be fun?" Anna said. "Yes," I said. "I'm sure I'm going to be a baby nurse when I grow up." "Me too," said Anna. "It's really easy to take care of children. All you have to do is remember to speak softly and kindly to them, and they mind you. I read that in the newspaper the other day." "Yes, of course," I said. "But you know there are people who yell at their children," Anna said, "and those children never mind their parents." It said that in the paper. "Who would want to yell at such a sweet little thing?" I said, and tickled Kirsten's foot. Kirsten sat on a blanket on the lawn and looked happy. She had such a round little forehead, and her eyes are bright blue. In her mouth she has 4 teeth upstairs and 4 down, which look just like grains of rice when she laughs. The only thing she can say is "hi, hi," and she says that most of the time. Perhaps she means different things every time, but you never know. Sometimes Kirsten rides in a wooden wagon. "How about taking her for a ride?" Anna suggested. So we did. "Come here, Kirsten dear," Anna said, and put her down in the wagon. "Now we are going to go for a little ride." She spoke very softly and kindly, just the way you should to little children. "There, now, aren't you nice and comfy?" she said. But Kirsten didn't think so at all. She started to stand straight up in the wagon and jump up and down and say, "Hi, hi." But of course, we couldn't let her do that. "I think we'd better tie her down," I said. So we did, with a heavy piece of cord. But then Kirsten started to howl so loud you could hear it a mile away. Olaf came running from the barn and said, "What are you doing to my little sister?" "Nothing," I said. "We are just speaking softly and kindly to her." "Well, that's all right," Olaf said. But also, you'd better let her do what she likes so she won't cry. We thought Olaf should know how his sister should be taken care of. So we let Kirsten stand up in the wagon and say, "Hi, hi," all she wanted. I would pull the wagon while Anna ran along beside Kirsten to catch her every time she fell. Then we came to a deep ditch, and when Kirsten saw it, she climbed out of the wagon. "Let's see what she's going to do," Anna said. Well, she showed us all right. There's something odd about little children. You think that their legs are too short to run very fast. But that's where you're wrong. A little child can run as fast as a rabbit if he tries to. At least Kirsten can. She said, "Hi, hi," and ran right into the ditch before we had time to wink an eye. There she stumbled and fell on her head in the water. It's true that Olaf had said we should let her do what she wanted to, and she wanted to lie in the ditch, but we still thought we'd better pull her out. She was sopping wet and yelling at the top of her voice. She scowled at us if it had been our fault that she had fallen in. But we spoke softly and kindly to her and put her in the wagon. We pulled her home to get some dry clothes, and she yelled the whole time. Olaf got furious when he saw how Kirsten looked. Olaf doesn't look too happy. "What do you think you're doing anyway?" he shouted. "Did you try to drown her?" Then Anna said that he should speak softly and kindly to us because we were children too, except we were big ones, of course. But Kirsten went over and threw her arms around Olaf's legs and cried and cried. So Anna and I felt just as if we had tried to drown her. Olaf helped us find some clean clothes for Kirsten, but then he had to go down to the barn again. We put Kirsten's best dress on because Olaf hadn't been able to find any other. It was so pretty, white with little tiny tucks and ruffles. "You have to be very careful of this dress," I said to Kirsten. But it was quite evident that she didn't understand what I said because she ran right over to the stove and got a big soot spot right in the middle of her dress. "Hi, hi," she said. We brushed it off as well as we could, but it was impossible to get much of it off. Kirsten laughed when we brushed her. She probably thought that we were playing a game. "It's 12 o'clock," Anna said all of a sudden. "It's time for Kirsten to have her lunch." We hurried to heat up her spinach in a saucepan on the stove. I took Kirsten on my lap and Anna fed her. She ate very well and opened her mouth so nicely that Anna said, "She really is an awfully nice little kid." Then Kirsten said, "Hi, hi," and hit the spoon down on the table. All the spinach flew into my eyes. Anna laughed until she almost dropped the plate, and I got mad at her. Kirsten laughed too, but she probably didn't know why Anna was laughing. She must think that it's quite natural for people to have spinach between the eyes. Then, all of a sudden, when she didn't want to eat any more, she closed her mouth tight and hit the spoon on the table again and again so that more than half of her spinach got on her dress. We gave her some fruit soup to drink from a cup, and more than half of that got on her dress too. After that, the beautiful dress wasn't white any longer, but green and red with just a little bit of white in certain spots. "There's one thing I'm happy about," Anna said, "and that is that it's time for Kirsten to take a nap now." "Yeah, that's one thing I'm happy about too," I said. And then we took off all of Kirsten's clothes again and put on her pajamas. When we had finally finished, we were worn out. "We're the ones who needs to take a nap, not Kirsten," I said to Anna. But we put Kirsten in her crib and went out of the nursery and closed the door. Then Kirsten started howling as loudly as she could. We tried to pretend that we didn't hear her, but she cried louder and louder until finally Anna stuck her head through the door and said, "Be quiet!" Of course we knew that you should speak softly and kindly to little children, but sometimes you just can't. But what the paper said was probably right, that children become little regular brats when you yell at them. At least Kirsten did. She cried louder than ever. Then we went both into her room. She was happy as soon as she saw us and stood up in her crib. She jumped up and down and said, "Hi, hi," the whole time you were in there. And she stuck her little hand out between the bars and patted me. When I leaned over the crib, she laid her cheek against mine. "She's awfully cute in spite of everything," I said. Then Kirsten bit my cheek, so I had a mark for 2 days. We laid her down in the crib and tried to tuck the blanket around her, but she kicked it off. When she had kicked it off 10 times, we didn't pay any more attention to her. We just said, "Sleep well now, dear," very softly and kindly. Then we went out and closed the door. Right away, she started howling again. "Enough is enough," Anna said. "Let her yell." We sat down at the kitchen table and tried to talk, but we couldn't because Kirsten yelled louder and louder and louder. Sometimes she was quiet for a couple of seconds, but that was only when she took a breath for the next howl. "Perhaps she has an ache somewhere," I said. "Goodness, what if she has a stomach ache?" Anna said. "It could be appendicitis or something." So we ran into Kirsten's room. She stood up in bed, and her eyes were filled with tears. But as soon as she saw us, she said, "Hi, hi," and started to jump up and down and laugh. "That kid doesn't have a stomach ache or any other kind of ache," Anna said. "Come on, let's go." So we closed the door and sat down by the kitchen table again, listening to Kirsten howl louder and louder. Finally, she got quiet. "Oh, how wonderful," I said. "She has finally gone to sleep." Anna and I took out Olaf's Old Maid game and sat down and played Old Maid, and it was very nice. "Babies should stay in bed all the time. Then at least you know where they are," Anna said. Then we heard a strange noise from the nursery. It sounded like a little happy mumble, the kind of sound that children make when they are doing something pleasant. "No, now this is going too far," I said. "It can't be possible that she's still awake." We tiptoed and peeked carefully through the keyhole. We could see Kirsten's crib, but we couldn't see Kirsten. Her crib was empty. We rushed into the nursery, and guess where Kirsten was? She was sitting in the open fireplace that had been beautiful before Kirsten got there. It wasn't exactly beautiful any longer because Kirsten was sitting in the middle of it with a jar of shoe polish in her hand. She was black with shoe polish from head to toe. She had shoe polish in her hair and shoe polish all over her face and shoe polish on her hands and on her pajamas and on her feet. And all of the fireplace was decorated with shoe polish. Probably Uncle Nils had stood by the fireplace to polish his shoes before the party and hadn't put the cover back on the jar. "Hi, hi," Kirsten said when she saw us. Then Kirsten stood up and ran toward Anna, and Anna yelled even louder than she did, "Don't touch me!" Kirsten did anyway. Anna grabbed her hands, but still got shoe polish all over herself. Then I laughed just as hard at Anna as she had at me when I got the spinach between my eyes. Aunt Lisa won't know her child when she sees her, I said when I had stopped laughing. We didn't know how to wash off shoe polish, so we decided to ask Britta. Anna, who was already smeared, would stay and hold Kirsten while I went to ask her. When I told Britta what Kirsten had done, she said, "Well, you're just fine baby nurses." Then she blew her nose and turned toward the wall and said that she was sick and didn't know how you washed off shoe polish. In the meantime, Olaf had come from the barn and he went absolutely wild when he saw Kirsten. "Are you out of your minds?" he yelled. We tried to explain to him that it wasn't our fault, but Olaf was furious and said there should be a law against people like us becoming baby nurses. But we all helped one another to fill a tub with warm water. Then we carried it out onto the lawn and held Kirsten out to it. She walked across the floor. She left cute little black footprints behind. We put her in the tub and scrubbed her thoroughly from top to toe. We washed her hair too. She got a little soap in her eyes, and then she yelled so loudly you could hear it all over Noisy Village. Carl and Bill came running and asked if we were slaughtering pigs. "No," Olaf said. "It's just these two fine baby nurses who are practicing." We couldn't get the shoe polish really off, and when we finished scrubbing and drying Kirsten, she was peculiar gray color all over. But she was happy anyway. It's a picture of her washing. She ran around on the lawn, stark naked, and yelled, "Hi, hi," and laughed so you could see every tooth in her mouth. Olaf said, "Isn't she a darling baby?" We thought that the gray color would probably wear off in time, so the pink child who was underneath would show up again. It would be around Christmas time, Carl thought. Afterward, Olaf put Kirsten to bed. She didn't say boo. She just stuck her thumb in her mouth and went to sleep. "That's the way to take care of children," Olaf said. Then he went to feed the pigs. Anna and I sat down on the kitchen steps to rest. "Poor Aunt Lisa, who has it like this every day," I said. "Do you know what I think?" Anna said. "I think all that in the paper was a lie, because it doesn't make any difference how you talk to little children. Whether you talk softly and kindly or yell at them, they still do exactly as they please." After that, we were quiet for a little while. "Anna, are you going to be a baby nurse when you grow up?" I said finally. "Perhaps," Anna said. But then she looked thoughtfully and stared out over the barn roof and said, "Well, I really don't know." And that's the end of chapter 13. And when we come back for chapter 14, that is the last chapter in this book. We're almost finished. We'll see you then.